Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, I thought we'd sort of piggyback off of last week's episode. I did a lake monster and other cryptids of Pennsylvania last week, Raystown Ray from Raystown in Pennsylvania. And we talked about some other cryptids. Some of them were like Dogman-ish or Goatman. There was a sheep squatch. One of them was like a little Bigfoot. It was like 4 foot tall Bigfoot. So I thought this week I would continue my Pennsylvania journey here and talk about some more Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania because, as I mentioned last week, we have some listeners of the show who are in Pennsylvania who I know pretty well. So thought we'd just cover some Pennsylvania Bigfoot sightings this week. Quick little side note, I'm feeling better. My cough is finally gone. If you guys are regular listeners to the show, my cough is finally gone. So I am hoping to have some actual real guests back on the show again soon, so I don't have to stop every 20 seconds to go cough and pause the show. It's fine when I do it myself because then I'm not wasting anybody else's time. But now that I'm feeling a little better, I think that's what I'm going to be doing. Getting some guests on. I have some cool guests that I would like to have on and I'm talking to. So hopefully next week we'll have a good show for you with a guest. But for this week, I do want to focus on Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania. Again, I'm using the BFRO database. This is not an endorsement of the BFRO. This is not a condemnation of the BFRO. People have very strong feelings regarding Matt Moneymaker, regarding the BFRO. I do not. Say what you will. I think it's a great database. I think there's a lot of good information on there, a lot of good stories. I've spoken to many people who have said that they've posted their stories and they've had a great experience. And I've spoken to some people who said it wasn't a great experience. So again, there's no judgment here. I'm simply reading these stories. Take them as you will. Again, question everything, and we will question everything tonight. So without further ado, let's get to some cool Bigfoot stories from the Keystone State. Okay, so this first one I'm going to talk about comes to us from Berks County. And I've picked this one because Berks County is where a certain person I know who listens to the show sometimes is from. And hopefully she's not reading too much into this. Or is it pronounced Reading? Who knows? So, yeah, but there's only one account from Berks County. And again, you go through the database and some counties have no sightings, some only have one, and then others have like 9 or 10 or 15, depending on the state, depending on the county. So this one from Berks County, only report that I could find on the BFRO database anyway, but it's a fairly lengthy story. So, and this is a Class A. So this is like an actual sighting of the creature. I think the B's and the C's, the Class B's and C's, I think are more like footprints or sounds or things like that. So the A's are like they actually saw something. So this one is from a while back, from 1991, February, first week of February. They're not exactly sure of the date. Berks County. Location details: top of Blue Mountain on the Appalachian Trail, State Game Land 110, Marshall's Path, Pennsylvania Atlas and Gazetteer Plate 66, extreme southwest corner. So pretty specific location here. And the Appalachian Trail, I mean, anybody who's into cryptids or the paranormal knows that the Appalachians and the Appalachian Trail just have a long history of weirdness, whether it's Mothman, whether it's ghosts, whether it's spooky lights, UFOs, or Bigfoot or other cryptids. So Mothman, all that, weird stuff. So let us read this account. So observed. Sighting was seen in 1991 in Blue Mountain, Berks County, PA, State Game Land 110, I believe in early February. And just to pause again here, a lot of people who have these experiences, some of them remember the exact date and time and others don't. I mean, I've had a lot of encounters and it happens, and I never planned on reporting it. I never planned on telling anybody. So I never wrote down the date. I'll know, like, because of where I was, I can say maybe it was July or August, or I can say it was February or around Christmas or whatever. But I don't always have the exact dates, and not everyone is always going to have them. So here we have just early February. So I just wanted to point that out because we get called out a lot for that, if we question when there's very exacting details and we question that, that's easily fact checkable. You can say, okay, there was no moon on this night, or it was rainy that night, because you have an exact date. If you don't, it's a little bit tougher to verify the accounts. But I also appreciate that people don't always, write the date down, because they don't know that, 10 years later, they're going to be reporting this online. So to continue, he says, I was grouse hunting on the top of the mountain. There was 10 to 12 inches of snow with a half to 1 inch of ice on top of the snow. It was very difficult to puncture your feet to walk through the snow and ice. I shot my grouse on top of the mountain about a half to 3/4 of a mile from where we came up to the top of the mountain. I shot twice after my friend with me yelled, grouse. I yelled, I got it, to my friend, who then proceeded to walk up to me. He was 75 yards away, and it took him about 15 to 20 minutes to get up to me. Then he walked a trail that went back to where the road starts at the top of the mountain. I stood there for 15 minutes as I heard my friend walking away from me. After I could hear his footsteps no more, I turned the other direction and was looking at the side of the mountain that we came up. I noticed a dark figure running along the ridge of the top of the mountain. For 50 to 100 yards, it ran. There was an opening and it stopped. Then it proceeded to run straight for me uphill and did not stop until it was about 40 to 50 feet away from me. It was not out of breath and did not make a sound, and just stood there and looked at me for about 1 to 2 minutes, and then walked away in the direction that it came from. First of all, in those conditions, you could not run or barely walk in it. It was hard to puncture the ice on top of the snow to walk, let alone run. It went through it like it wasn't even there for 200 yards, and when it stopped 50 feet away, you couldn't even see it breathe or hear it breathe. He ran that distance in about 1 to 3 minutes, maybe. It scared the hell out of me. I wasn't sure what it was until it stopped right in front of me. It found me. I wasn't looking for it. And I can tell that when he stopped in the opening of the ridge, that he can see blaze orange because he ran faster than straight for me after he seen me in my blaze orange one-piece outfit. He was there in no time at all, running uphill a 100 to 150 yards. He walked away and looked back at me once and then kept going. He was all black, very long hair. It was hard to see his face through the hair. Tall, around 7 to 7.5 feet, 400 to 500 pounds, I thought. Very powerful animal, seemed very intelligent because I think he heard the gunshots or the yelling and wanted to find out who was making the noise on the mountain and came right to me. I was scared at first, and when it stopped, I put my shotgun right on it at 45 to 50 feet, and it didn't even flinch. It wasn't scared, and it just walked away. My friend with me is 6'1", 200 pounds, and when I told him what happened, he didn't believe me, but he tried to run on the road at the top of the mountain on level ground, flat. He took 3 steps and fell on his face. Other witnesses. I had no witness. My friend with me wanted to leave and not go back to see the tracks. This was close to noon. Lighting conditions were overcast. They were on the top of the mountain in a wooded area. So I'll do the follow-up investigation, and then I'll give my thoughts. So this is from BFRO investigator Jim Osborne. When I spoke with the witness, he stated that it looked like the creature in the Patterson film. He added that as it was walking away, it turned to look at him by turning its upper torso, not just the head. Witness emphasized that the creature's actions in the snow was an unbelievable display of power to move so swiftly and effortlessly on difficult terrain. He also stated that once the creature spotted him and moved toward him, he felt that he was about to die. He only had a very light shot in the gun, and there was no way he could run away in the snow at the speed the creature was approaching. However, once the creature stopped and displayed no aggression, then he no longer felt threatened. When asked to better describe the face, he said that there was so much hair and the eyes were so deep set, it was like looking at a mask, impossible to determine whether the features under the hair were more human or ape-like. So this is a very clear sighting, and this is not a story where you can say it was a misidentification. I don't think, in the summer, you can say maybe you saw a man in a ghillie suit. If it was a fleeting glimpse, you could say maybe it was a bear, and people will say that, skeptics will say that. This is a very clear sighting, if the witness is to be believed. And so again, in a story like this, there's 2 possibilities. Either this person is lying, completely lying, or they saw something really strange. One, bears should be hibernating this time of year. But let's say that it was a bear. Bears don't get that tall. They can't run that far. I mean, bears can stand up. They can take a couple of steps, maybe. People think they see bears in the circus and, oh, look, the bear's walking and it's wearing a ballerina dress or a tutu. And, they think bears in the wild can do that. And they can, but they usually don't. And they're not running more than a couple of steps. And they're not going to run. They're going to waddle. They're very awkward on two legs. Again, it's usually more of a scare tactic. It's a display, it's an aggressive display. So not a bear, definitely not a bear. Not a man in a suit. First of all, you'd have to be real stupid to put on a monkey suit in the snow and run towards an armed hunter who's wearing a vest, who's clearly a hunter. He's got a gun, even if it's birdshot in there, because they're hunting grouse. Like he said, the shot in the gun was not going to be enough to stop this thing. Birdshot would, not stop anything that large. So very interesting. And, he says this thing ran up to him and then stopped and then walked away, but it turned to kind of look at him, but it turned its whole torso. This is not a bear. And I can't believe this is a man in a suit. So we're left with two options. This is either a complete fabrication, or this guy saw something that we cannot explain and that does not seem to exist, really. But here we are looking at it. He says it looks like Patty from the Patterson-Gimlin film. Couldn't really see the face. He says the thing is covered in hair. He thought he was about to die, and that leaves some room for interpretation. Was this just pure fear? Was this infrasound, which again is the sound that large creatures will allegedly emit to frighten their prey or to freeze their prey, paralyze them? Or was this, some people are going to go into the mind speak, and this thing was telling you, I'm going to kill you, and he heard it in his mind. So who knows? I'm going to chalk it up just to simply fear. He's got this large thing running at him, and he's got birdshot in the gun, and he knows, like, if this thing wanted to kill him, there's really no deterrent. So I found this one really interesting because, again, it's very clear cut. A lot of these stories, like, yeah, they could be lies. It could be an actual Bigfoot, but it could be a man in a ghillie suit. It could be a bear. It could be a moose. It could be a deer. It could be a misidentification of something else. It could be a hoax. This one, there's two options. It's either a complete fabrication or it's real. So there you go. I don't know what you guys believe, but for me, this is a really sort of compelling story. I've hiked a mountain in Berks County, really cool. And, you can get into some, I mean, there's little towns and stuff, and civilization is nearby, but you don't have to go very far to get into real deserted areas, real backwoods areas. So I can believe that he saw something, but 7 to 7.5 feet tall. And again, running through the snow, as someone who's camped in the snow and hiked in the snow, moving in the snow is so hard. It is so hard, especially if you got, what is, I forget how much he says, how much snow is on the ground. So he says there was 10 to 12 inches of snow. So you're talking about almost a foot of snow, trying to get through it, trying to puncture through the ice. You're post-holing. So you're lifting your foot and you're crunching through. You're lifting a foot and crunching through. It's not easy to walk in, much less run in. So I don't think this is a man in a suit. Again, it's either a complete lie or it's the complete truth. This guy saw a creature that we have no proof that it actually exists. So very cool story. I like this one. It's the only one from Berks County, but I think this one's a winner. Very cool story. All right. So story number 2, I chose this one because it's from Huntingdon County, and that's where Raystown Ray allegedly resides, in Raystown Lake. So this one is from 2021, so a more recent report. Witnesses hear multiple wood knocks while night fishing at Mount Union. So this is a Class B, not a sighting, but these guys heard something weird. This is from August 12th in 2021, Huntingdon County, Pennsylvania. Location details: turn off Route 522 onto Ogwick Mills Road, and there's a pull-off about a mile down the road once off the bridge. Nearest town is Mount Union. Nearest road is Pump Station Road. So observed. One night, me and my friends went catfishing in a local spot near my town. We had set up at about 8:30 p.m., and we were having a good time. At about 9 p.m., we had our first bite and ended up being a 15-minute fight to end up being a turtle. Sad. Shortly after, at approximately 9:30 p.m., we heard what sounded like our first wood knock. Personally, I didn't believe or didn't want to believe what I had just heard, but within minutes, we all heard the second knock and were all speechless in what we had just heard. After talking about it for a couple of minutes, we heard another, but this time it came from the other side of the river. Speechless yet again, we all just looked at each other, and within seconds, we heard another. But this time it was right behind us and close. That's when we knew we had to leave. As we were packing our fishing poles in the car, we heard 4 loud, aggressive knocks within 30 yards of where we were parked. We immediately shoved the poles in the car and left. After getting several miles down the road, we stopped and said, let's go back and try to get it on video because no one would believe us. So that's what we did, and we got 3 knocks on video. Also noticed, one of my friends was there just before the incident occurred, and when he left, he sent us a text and said he felt like he was being watched as he walked out of the woods. This was just minutes before the first wood knock. 4 other witnesses. This was between the hours of 9 and 10 p.m., very dark, forested area with river running through the woods with a road off to the side with farming fields. So there's a follow-up investigation here from BFRO investigator Benjamin C. And he says, I contacted the witness and was able to speak at length to him and his 3 friends who were present during the encounter. I found them and their account of the events that night to be very credible. As stated in the original report, the witness and his 3 friends had gone night fishing for catfish at a local fishing spot on Ogwick Creek, roughly 4 miles southeast of Mount Union. The witness fishes the area frequently, although never at night. The witness and his friends were the only present people at the time. So there's a little map here. And this continues. At the time, the witnesses were fishing from a location on the south bank of the creek, roughly 100 yards east of where Ogwick Mill Road crosses Ogwick Creek. The witness and his friends started fishing around 8:30 p.m. and at approximately 9 p.m. had their first bite. After spending a quarter of an hour fighting what turned out to be a snapping turtle, the witness and his friends took a pause from their fishing and proceeded to cook some hot dogs for dinner over their campfire. The witness and his friends also pointed out that the woods by the creek were dead silent. So this is interesting. No insects or birds were heard, although there was a light drizzle of rain coming down, which could have contributed to the lack of natural noise in the area. Not long after, around 9:30, the witness and his friends heard the first wood knock. The witness described the knock as a high-pitched cracking noise like wood hitting wood. The witness estimated the knock was between 50 and 80 yards away. Several minutes later, the witness and his friends heard a second knock, this one seemingly closer at less than 50 yards away. Both the first and second knocks came from the south side of the creek, the same side of the creek as the witness and his friends at their campfire. As the witness and his friends were discussing what exactly they had just heard and what it could have been, then they heard a faint third knock from across the creek to the north. No more than a minute after this third knock, they heard a fourth knock, again from the south bank of the creek at an estimated distance of less than 30 yards. After this fourth knock, the witness and his friends made the decision to leave, as the encroaching knocks had left them uncomfortable with the unknowns of the situation. They quickly gathered up their fishing gear, camp chairs, and food, put out their fire, and loaded up their vehicle to leave. As they were packing up their vehicle, they heard 4 loud wood knocks in quick succession less than 30 yards away from where they were parked. At this point, they simply threw their gear into the vehicle and left the area. After driving several miles back towards Mount Union, the witness and his friends made the decision to return to the location and see if they could record a knock on video with their cell phones. After turning around and driving back to the parking area by the fishing hole, they parked their car with the windows down and listened. Several minutes later, they heard 3 knocks, which they were able to record on a cell phone video. The witness and his friends left and returned to the witness's house to review the video they took, and after approximately an hour, decided to head back and see if they could get further video evidence of the knocks. At this point, it was about 11 p.m. at night. The witness and his friends came back to the same location, which was seemingly deserted. Interestingly, the witness stated that the woods were no longer silent as they were when they started fishing earlier that night. One of the witness's friends took a branch and knocked it against a tree to imitate a wood knock. In less than a minute, the witness and his friends heard a wood knock back. This knock was captured on video as well. I reviewed the videos the witness and his friends took of their return trips to the location, and the sounds recorded on the footage are congruent with other recordings of alleged Bigfoot wood knocks. Based upon my interview with the witnesses, the audio recordings provided, and the visual and vocal reactions of the witnesses to the knocks received on the recordings, I feel very confident in stating that the witnesses heard at least 2 sasquatches communicating via wood knocks that night. Regarding the area of the sighting, Ogwick Creek is a 30.8-mile-long tributary of the Juniata River in Huntingdon County. So the Juniata feeds into Raystown Lake. To the west are State Game Land 71 and 99 along Jacks Mountain, while to the east is Black Log Mountain, which is part of the Tuscarora State Forest. This part of Pennsylvania is very rural, characterized by narrow valleys and steep forested ridges. The forests in the area are generally mixed oak forest interspersed with groves of white pine and other deciduous species. White-tailed deer, black bear, turkey, and small game abound in the area. So... Anybody who listens to the show, I think, knows what I think and what Scott thinks, my friend and frequent co-host of wood knocks. I think they're interesting in certain ways, because if you are somewhere really remote and you're hearing these wood knocks, what could they be? They could be branches falling, and but I think branches falling have a different sound. Sometimes at night, the wood, with changing temperatures, wood will contract and expand. So you have cooling temperatures, the wood is kind of contracting, it can crack, it can sound like a wood knock. I've heard this in the woods many times while camping at night. The temperature drops and you hear the wood cracking. Or if it snows, it gets very cold and you hear the wood starting to crack, and it can sound like tree knocks. But then there's like actual tree knocks where it's just something really loud. It's not something in the distance. It's not something faint. So I don't know what these guys heard. I don't know how clearly they heard it. They're saying some of these were very close, 50 yards away, 30 yards away. So I'm not sure. This map that they're showing here, I see what they're going for. There's a lot of wooded areas here, but there's a lot of open space here too, and there's some homes. So I don't know if this is really squatchy, to use that term, territory. Could something be in there? Sure, but hard to say. I mean, it looks a little sparsely wooded, because you do get a sense of scale of the woods here. You see some houses here and some roads, and it looks fairly populated. So could these knocks have been somebody chopping wood in the distance? Could this have been someone messing with them? And that's my real pet peeve with wood knocks, and my real gripe with it. Just, you don't know what's doing it. I don't know of any reports where somebody says they saw a Bigfoot carrying a large stick and just banging it against a tree. So we're assuming that it's Bigfoot simply because what in the woods could lift up a branch and knock it against a tree? A human being, a Bigfoot. It needs to be something with, opposable thumbs that can grab onto a stick and whack it against a tree. I just banged my computer here. Sorry. So I understand the reasoning, but it's kind of a jump in reasoning. And as Scott and I have said on the show before, how do you know that these aren't just other Bigfoot hunters in the area just making tree knocks, or, people trying to scare you? Another thing that bothers me about tree knocks is that people will knock, and then they'll say, oh, within 10 seconds, I got a response. And it's like, is Bigfoot just walking through the woods, and every time there's a tree knock, he immediately bends down, grabs the perfect stick that's not going to break, that's not too wet, that's not too brittle, picks up the perfect stick and bangs it against a tree and returns the tree knock? Tree knocks are real iffy for me. Again, I've heard some weird tree knocks in the woods. I don't know what they are. I'm not going to necessarily attribute them to Bigfoot. It could be some preternatural phenomenon that trees do that we just don't understand yet. Maybe it's ghosts. We want to go for the unexplained, explaining the unexplained. Maybe it's ghosts. Maybe an alien's running through the woods, and he's got his little probe out and he's banging it against trees. Any one of those explanations are just as equally valid as Bigfoot doing this. So I don't like that this is attributed to Bigfoot necessarily. I think there's maybe kind of sort of possibly a mystery in there with tree knocks, that people do hear these things. I know there's some very credible people who are not just hearing faint little poppings of trees because it's getting cold out. They're hearing actual knocks. But are those Bigfoot hunters looking for Bigfoot? And we've discussed on the show before, we've seen things online where two groups of Bigfoot hunters are talking to each other because they don't know the other group is in the woods. So they're knocking on a tree and they're getting knocks back, and, oh, wow, we got Bigfoot. No, you're talking to another bunch of guys in the woods banging on trees. So we just can't make that jump. So again, for that reason, tree knocks, I don't discount them fully. I think there's an interesting possibility there, but I don't give them much credence. So this story, again, I like the overlap. I like that it's in the same county and along the same tributary that feeds into Racetown Lake and Racetown Ray, the sea monster, or the lake monster rather, of Pennsylvania. So you kind of get that, two cryptids very close together. But tree knocks just don't do it for me. Sorry. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. All right, so I'm going to do two more stories. Both of these are fairly long, but interesting. So this first one is a possible trackway found and photographed 50 miles northeast of Pittsburgh. And Becky, hi. I know you're from Pittsburgh, so I know you guys, you and Scott, listen every week. So pick this one for you. But there's some cool pictures here, and I'd like to know what everybody out there thinks. So this is from 2022. I picked these just because these are like the most recent sightings from Pennsylvania, and they're from, near Pittsburgh. So this is from December, Monday, December 20th, Indiana County. Location details: Shady Drive off of Warren Road. Nearest town is Indiana. Nearest road is Shady Drive. So observed. Shortly after dawn, I was out on the back porch having coffee and watching my dog on her leash. I have heard coyotes lately, and I don't let my dog out alone. I was looking at the deer tracks in the snow and had 4 deer in the backyard the previous night. There was a large field next to the house. When I was looking in that direction, I noticed some strange tracks in the snow. About an hour or so later, I walked over to inspect the tracks. The tracks were similar to human tracks, but different. The thing that was most apparent to me was the distance between the footprints, which were approximately 4 feet apart. There were no shoe treads in the tracks. I believe the tracks were made sometime after 11 p.m. and 3 to 5 a.m. because I was outside until around 11 p.m. Then I was up around 6 a.m., but it was dark at the time. I didn't see them until it was light. The tracks had fresh snow inside the tracks, indicating they were several hours old. I could not possibly see the toe prints. I have pictures of the tracks on my phone. Also noticed, I have heard coyotes lately and seen a lot of deer in the field. Other stories, I have not heard of any other incidents in this area. Time and conditions, approximately 7:30 a.m., low light, light snow. Neighborhood situated next to a large field. The tracks were between my house and the next door neighbor. So before I get into the analysis here, the follow-up investigation, I just want to talk about this because you have this guy who's out at 11 o'clock at night. So this happens between 11 o'clock at night and the morning. So maybe, 3 to 5 a.m. A lot of tracks, human-like tracks, bigger than human, longer apart than human. So 4 feet apart. That's a big stride. Not huge, but pretty big, bigger than most humans, especially if someone's wearing large snow boots or snowshoes or something similar to that to walk through the field. It's interesting, like, why would somebody be walking through the field at night? Even though it was dark when he woke up, you'd think if someone were walking through the field, they might have a flashlight or something. It's a dangerous proposition to trespass on people's property, especially in the dark, when they have dogs, when they might have, firearms in the house. And I know it's not necessarily his property, but still, you have somebody walking around out there. Somebody might take a shot at you. So just wanted to mention that. And also, skeptics will talk about snow melt and how they, the prints will melt and then refreeze and melt and refreeze. And you kind of get this weird warped footprint that initially was like a bear print or a regular human track that has now morphed into something that looks like a Bigfoot print. But this seemed to have happened overnight. He didn't seem to notice the tracks the day before, but notices them the next morning. And it was snowing overnight. So clearly cool enough where these tracks are not melting severely to warp and spread out and become much larger than they originally were. So I thought that was interesting. And again, if there was light snow overnight, then these tracks were made before the light snow. So let's get into the follow-up investigation, which is again by BFRO investigator Benjamin C. So Benjamin says, I spoke with the witness at length about what he observed. I found him to be both sincere and very credible. Recently retired from a career in law enforcement, the witness and his wife were staying with family friends at a house in a small subdivision on the outskirts of the town of Indiana, which is in Indiana County in western Pennsylvania. The subdivision is bordered on the southeast and southwest by agricultural fields and additional residential areas to the north. The witness had initially woken up to take his dog out to go to the bathroom before dawn. The witness saw what looked like a strange trackway, but did not go out to investigate the tracks until after dawn at approximately 7:30 a.m. When the witness went to investigate the tracks, it was lightly snowing. The tracks were partially filled by a dusting of snow. So again, they were made before it started snowing. At the time, the depth of the snow on the ground was approximately 3 inches. The low temperature during the previous night was 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So there you go. There's no snow melt. It's below freezing. There were at least 40 tracks observed by the witness. The trackway came in from the field to the northeast, threaded between the house the witness was staying at and the neighbor's house, and exited out onto the road. Despite not wanting to jump to conclusions, the witness said that the first thing that he observed about the tracks were how similar they were to the Bigfoot trackways he had seen on television and the internet. What struck the witness the most was the distance between each print, as well as their width in contrast to his own print. For comparison, the witness's shoe size is 13, very large, and is 13 inches in length and 4¾ inches wide at the widest part at the ball of the foot. Toe indentations were possible, but not well defined. So we have a photo here. And you can see some footprints. And here is another look at, it looks like the witness's boot, and then a print here, which looks more like a bear, B-A-R-E, not the animal bear, footprint, because it's much wider at the front than it is in the back. And boots are typically more like figure 8 shaped, but equal in the front as they are in the back. I mean, a little bit pointed towards the front, but they don't have that sort of heel versus toe splay at the front and the sharp heel at the back. While the witness did not measure the tracks with a ruler or tape measure, using his size 13 shoe as a guide, he estimated the step length between each print, the distance from the heel of one print to the heel of the next, to be at least 4 feet or 48 inches, 122 centimeters. The estimated stride length, as defined by one complete revolution of the foot, beginning at initial ground contact or heel strike and ending when that same foot comes to the same position again to make ground contact, was approximately 8 feet or 96 inches. So that is a big stride. There was very little observed lateral deviation in step width, with the prints being essentially in line with one another as seen in the photographs below. So if you look at this, you can clearly see some of the boot prints, but here's a trackway. Interesting. So something walked through here, whether, and again, bears should be hibernating. They're clearly not bear prints. This is either someone in boots or snowshoes or barefoot, or this is a Bigfoot. So let us continue. For comparison, according to the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, the average male step length is 31 inches, 79 centimeters, and the average stride length is 62 inches, 158 centimeters. This places the trackway far outside the average for a human male. As a thought experiment, according to the website marathonhandbook.com, for a human male to determine their average step length, their height in inches needs to be multiplied by 0.415 if human proportions are applied to the step and stride measurements observed in the trackway. To achieve an average step length of 48 inches, a human male would need to be a height of 9.6 feet. And they do the math here. Note that this does not mean that whatever made the tracks was 9.6 feet tall, just that this is the size required for a human male to achieve that average step length. And again, you're talking in snow. So if someone's wearing fake Bigfoot tracks, or they're wearing snowshoes or heavy boots, that's a very long stride for a human person to make. We can infer, however, that what made the tracks presumably was taller, or at least had longer legs than the average human male. So it could have been a tall guy, or it could have been Bigfoot. Who knows? As far as possible misidentification, the witness is familiar with bear tracks, and being an outdoorsman his entire life, did not observe claws on any of the tracks. The snow-covered yard also displayed the tracks of deer, rabbit, and coyote as well, yet none of these could explain the prints that were discovered. And again, it's December. Is it possible that there's still a few bears out and not hibernating? Of course. It's not like, they like a timer goes off and they all just immediately hibernate and then they wake up all at the same time. They don't. It's weather, temperatures, all sorts of things can affect that. So is it possible a bear was up and about? Of course, but these tracks don't look like bear tracks. Given the shallow depth of the snow and the lack of any fore or hind track presence in the shallow snow, rabbit can be ruled out as a proximate cause for the tracks. Furthermore, the prints themselves lack the contour of human footwear. As I was saying earlier, human footwear is a little bit more uniform, whereas a bear, B-A-R-E, unshoed print is going to be a little bit more wider at the front where the toes are, and then narrower at the back with the heel. The prints themselves lack the contour of human footwear as well as any indication of tread, and can be seen comparing the witness's footprints to those of the trackway. So again, the witness's footprints have treads in them, and the other footprints don't. So to continue, the witness showed the prints to his wife later that day. His wife also thought that the prints were very odd and untold. The witness also stated that he regrets not taking photos immediately when he first saw the trackway. And again, this is one of those things where you see something, you don't automatically assume it's Bigfoot. You're just like, oh, was somebody walking over here? Was this a big animal? Again, and I like stories like this where people aren't immediately like, ooh, Bigfoot. They're thinking something else until they take a closer look, and then they're sort of saying, could this have been Bigfoot? In this researcher's assessment, given the step length and the stride length of the prints, the lack of any identifiable shoe tread in the prints themselves, the chronological context of the track find, and its congruence to other Bigfoot tracks found elsewhere, strongly suggests that the tracks are not human in origin, but Bigfoot in nature. Regarding the area of the trackway, geographically, it falls under the Pittsburgh Low Plateau, part of the Greater Western Allegheny Plateau. This area is characterized as a well-dissected plateau, flat on a large scale, but locally hilly, with rounded hills, narrow valleys. Hilltop elevations range from 1,100 to 1,400 feet. So he finishes up saying, given the location of the trackway, it might come as a surprise to some that Bigfoot would be found so close to human civilization. However, given the increasing body of anecdotal, transient, and conditional evidence of Sasquatches exploiting the margins of human civilization, the location is not that surprising. The town of Indiana, as seen in the imagery below, is surrounded by forested, dissected plateaus to the west, north, and east. So you can see here, and again, I am fine with that. Again, you're not going to find Bigfoot in New York City. You're not going to find them in these large areas. But we do hear a lot of stories about sightings occurring on the fringes of civilization. So small towns, trailer parks, things like that, where you will have people saying they saw something kind of creeping around the back alley or, in someone's yard or the forest at the edge of their property. But you do have large forests. So it's kind of encroaching on human civilization, but it's not in the mixed there. You're not going to see it walking down the street, but if this is 2, 3 in the morning and it's snowy out and everyone's asleep and this thing needs to get through, who knows? The footprints, again, there's not a lot of detail there. So this is one of those things where I believe there are 3 possibilities. I think it's either a human being just walking through, somebody just trekking through here. It's not very dense here. I mean, you see the trackway and it's a lot of open space. So it's in a way very hard for me to believe that an elusive, shy, undiscovered primate is just going to waltz through here, because this is just like anybody looking out the window is going to see it walking. So to me, that's a huge red flag that it's very exposed here. And I don't think a smart, intelligent, shy primate that values its privacy is just going to waltz through here and leave all these prints and possibly be seen. So the possibilities are it's a human, it's Bigfoot, or it's a hoax, either by the witness or someone hoaxing him. But hoax, Bigfoot, or just human being walking through. Again, it's also possible that he didn't notice the tracks the day before. They could have melted. This could be snow melt. We're kind of taking it on faith that these were made the night that he's saying they were made, but it's very possible they were made the day before and he just didn't notice. Maybe the light wasn't hitting them the right way and he didn't notice them until the next morning. Who knows? But this picture here of the area that I'm showing, and if you're listening on audio only, it's a very, it looks like it's right through a neighborhood. There's some houses here, some cars parked. There's a light pole. There's some bushes and, some trees in the distance that don't have any leaves on them, but it's a very exposed area. No cover. I just can't imagine an undiscovered primate walking through here unless it absolutely needed to. And you would think somebody else would have seen something. So to me, I think this is just somebody walking through, or maybe he just didn't realize the tracks were there until a couple of days later. Maybe some snow melt. Not overnight because it was 20 degrees, but if these tracks were there a day or two before the witness saw them, then snow melt is then absolutely a possibility, with the sun beating down on them for a day or two. Even if the temperatures are cool, I could see that happening. So this one I find very interesting, but ultimately I don't know if I can buy into it. It just seems, with this picture here, I think this is very damning. I can't see an undiscovered primate doing this. It's foolish. It's going to get shot. It's going to get seen. So we will move on. And that brings us to our last story. This is another Class A. So this is a daylight sighting, very credible to witness, daylight sighting of a Sasquatch walking along Bike Trail 60 east of Pittsburgh, Ghost Town Trail. And this is submitted by witnesses I don't know if it's Francine or Fracine. It's spelled Fracine. Bobel. It might need to be Francine. And Vincent Weiland on Tuesday, October 18th, 2022. And the follow-up investigation is done by a very special person. So we'll get to that. So this happened on October 5th of 2022. So again, not that long ago, a little less than 2 years ago. Cambria County. Location details: the ghost town trails between Ebensburg, Pennsylvania, and Nantiglow, Pennsylvania. Investigator notes: GPS coordinates for witness Vincent's handpicked best guess for spot where the creature was seen in terrain, almost no distinct landmarks seen from the air, and it has the coordinates here. I'm going to put links to all these down in the description below because there's a lot to read in here. I might be skipping over certain things that I just don't want to recite on the air. It can get a little tedious and boring, so I'm trying to stick to the salient points here. But I will link to these below so you guys can check them out and read the full reports for yourself. Nearest town is Nantiglow. Nearest road is Route 22. So observed. On October 5th, 2022, while my boyfriend and I were biking on the Ghost Town trails near Ebensburg, PA, we saw a Bigfoot come about 150 yards in front of us. He was walking along the trail towards us. We couldn't see his face. When he saw us, he turned and quickly walked into the woods. We were shocked at what we saw. As we went by, we looked into the woods and didn't see anything. We didn't stop, then but continued on until we finally stopped to talk about what we saw. It was really shocking. There were no sounds or smells, didn't get a look at his face, but as he was walking, you could see how big his stride was. There was a huge space between his legs. On the way back, we stopped and looked around for prints and marks, but didn't see anything. The leaves were really heavy there and blowing all over. The sighting was between Ebensburg, PA, and Nantiglow. We thought this was a once-in-a-lifetime thing and thought it was so cool. Yes, Bigfoot does exist. Also noticed, no sounds or smells. It was quiet, no birds chirping. 2 witnesses, herself and the boyfriend. She's not aware of any other stories. This is about 4:30 p.m. They were on the Ghost Town trails, old railroad tracks that were converted to recreational trails, heavy woods where we see a lot of wildlife, trees, and dense forests. So before I get into the follow-up investigation, this is another interesting one where it's a daylight sighting, fairly close, 2 witnesses. They're pretty sure about what they're seeing here. A huge stride, huge space between the legs. This thing sees them and then ducks into the woods. So shy, doesn't want to be seen, sees people coming and ducks into the woods. It's October. Bears could be out, but this, again, I don't think this is a bear. Bears, when they stand up, they have little stubby legs. Their hind legs are not very long. And if they do take the few steps they can take, it's going to be little wobbles. They're not taking huge strides. They're not bipeds. So, again, this is either a complete fabrication or they saw a Bigfoot, or it's somebody in a suit, which I don't believe. But we'll get to the follow-up investigation, see if we get a size on this thing. But the follow-up investigation is by Matthew Moneymaker, or as my dad calls him, Matt Pennypincher. Which it always cracks me up. Matt Pennypincher. It's an unfortunate last name, Moneymaker. It just makes him kind of sound like a con man. And I'm not casting aspersions on Matt. He seems like a nice guy, but unfortunate last name when you're trying to talk about things of this nature. So Matt says, I spoke with both witnesses, Francine Bobel, and again, her name is sadly spelled wrong again here, and Vincent Weiland. This report is very reliable. The witnesses definitely saw a tall, dark Sasquatch walking along Ghost Town Trail bike path between Nantiglow and Ebensburg, Pennsylvania on October 5th, 2022. The witnesses are both 73-year-old retirees, so I think that's interesting. They ride that bike trail frequently. They've seen lots of animals on the trail. They both scoffed at the possibility that it could have been a human in dark clothes. They said it was way too big for a human. The long strides were striking. So to pause, these witnesses are older. They're not, hoaxers are probably going to be younger people trying to get a laugh, trying to get this on the internet and, goof around and have a good laugh about it. But these are people who've lived a long life. They know what they're looking at. They're saying the long strides were striking. So they're saying it was too big to be a man in dark clothes or a costume. It was not a bear because it has long strides. Something taking big steps like that. A bear is going to waddle and take little tiny baby steps. They can't walk too well on 2 legs, not for any distance anyway. And they're not going to have a long stride. The couple was pedaling eastward towards Ebensburg. The Sasquatch came into view not long after they rounded a bend onto a long straightaway section of bike trail. It was obvious to Vincent, the first one who spotted it, that it had been walking along the bike trail before it came into view. It was not just crossing the trail at that moment. It was walking on the trail in the direction of Nanty Glow. Vincent and Francine noticed it about the same time it seemed to notice them, then veered off into the trees and brush. Would a Sasquatch walk along a bike trail during the day? That depends on several factors, such as 1. It is much easier and faster and quieter for any animal to get from point A to point B by walking along the bike trail rather than through the surrounding terrain. And that's what you have. You have game trails, and you have any hike. You go on a hiking trail, you're always going to see deer prints and other prints. Animals will use these. It's the path of least resistance. And as long as there's no people around, they will use these trails. 2, how much bike traffic does the bike trail see on any given day? Is the trail often free of any traffic? 3, are there enough long, straight sections of trail so a Sasquatch can spot bike riders from a distance? It's more likely to be surprised by a bike approaching quietly along a curvy forest trail. And this should be 4, but is labeled as 2. How close does the forest cover come to the edge of the bike trail? Close enough that a Sasquatch only needs to take a few steps to be out of view from bikes approaching from a distance. So these questions are interesting, and I get what he's saying here. Again, at the same time, if you're talking about this undiscovered primate that is, king of the woods, and the woods are its home, and it knows everything, and it can hear things and see things that we can't. I don't understand how they get surprised so often. I don't understand road crossings where they jump out like as a car is coming. 3 a.m, you see headlights, and this thing is going to run across the road right in front of the headlights and not just wait for the car to pass. I can understand, deer doing this. Deer are dumb as dirt, but you have this creature that allegedly is super intelligent. You wonder how they get surprised. You wonder why they cross the road when a car is coming, when if they wait literally 10 seconds, they will just never be seen. So I don't know, maybe there's just some dumb Sasquatch out there. Yeah, there's dumb people, so I guess there's dumb Bigfoot too. So to continue, the witnesses say they often ride their bikes from Revlock to Nanty Glow, but usually see 1 or 2 other riders. On weekends, there are more, but still only a handful or 2. Many times they can recall seeing no other riders the whole way until they are very close to town. The incident happened at 4:30 p.m. on a Wednesday, so a lot of people are going to be at work. They're saying they don't see a lot of people on these trails, and even popular hiking trails that I've been on, you don't tend to see tons and tons of people. I mean, it's not Midtown Manhattan. So on that hand, I can kind of see a Bigfoot getting surprised. Again, if it's lost in thought or just doesn't hear them, who knows? The couple has seen deer many times and other animals along the trail, but not every time. The Ghost Town Trail, a repurposed railroad bed, has several long straight stretches tightly lined with forest growth. A Sasquatch could be confident about using the trail, knowing it will likely see or hear approaching bikes from a long distance and then disappear in seconds. So again, perhaps it just got spooked. It wasn't paying attention, or it rounded a bend and then it saw these people coming and was like, oh shit, I got to dunk into the woods. Bigfoot do get seen. They do get surprised. Not very often. So that I think goes to show that they are smart for the most part. They're going to make mistakes. Every living thing does. So I guess that's how they get caught. So then Matt goes into setting up a trail camera system here. And I'm not going to read all this because it's very technical. And he talks about setting up trail cams and trying to see if they can catch something on these trails. And I think all they're going to get are bikers and hikers. So I will skip that. And then there's some maps here just kind of showing where it is. You can see this is pretty much east of Pittsburgh and west of Hershey. So again, kind of close to Raystown Lake. Not super close, but closer. And there's just tons of maps here where he really zooms into the trail. And then there's a picture of the trail. So you can see it's paved. This is not a backwoods trail. This is a paved trail. It's an old railroad bed. So it's flat. It's paved. You can see a biker here. It's wooded on either side. So I guess it could be squatchy, but this squatch seems to have made a mistake. But if you look at this map where it's really zoomed in, I mean, you can see some roads here and it's all just woods from where they're saying they saw this creature, this red marker here. But this trail sort of runs somewhat parallel to Beulah Road, and there's no houses. There's no sign of civilization aside from the roads. So if something is going to lurk, this might be a good place for it. So again, this is an interesting one to me. Matt Moneymaker tends to believe stories more than he probably should, just based on what I've seen on Finding Bigfoot. But he spoke to the witnesses. He's saying they're very credible. They're 73 years old. I don't imagine many 73-year-old couples, a man and his wife, or a boyfriend rather, are going to try to hoax anybody about Bigfoot. That's just not the style of that generation. Um, so I don't know. Again, I don't think they saw a bear. Could this have been a man in a suit? Possibly. Witness testimony can be a little screwy. You think you see something. If it's startling, your mind could misremember things. But they keep talking about the stride. There's a huge space between the legs. And I think that's interesting to me because they couldn't see his face. They're not really talking any details about this thing. They say it was a Bigfoot, but they mention the stride, the space between the legs. So that's what's getting me. That's what stuck out to them, that they saw this thing that was big and possibly a Bigfoot. So again, either this 73-year-old couple are lying or they saw something unexplained. So I thought this was really cool. And it's the first report I've come across that Matt Moneymaker, that penny pincher, did the follow-up investigation for. So I thought this was really cool. Again, I'm going to link down below so you guys can check it out yourselves, because there's a lot more information in here than I went over, but a very cool story. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed more Bigfoot stories, this time from Pennsylvania. A little all over the place. I didn't pick any particular county, but some cool stories. I think that first one and the last one are really the ones that impressed me the most. The footprints, I'm really iffy on. Tree knocks, I just don't like. It's all interesting. It's all evidence to throw on the pile when trying to make the case for Bigfoot. It's not proof. And I have a lot of people in the comments, they say, I have proof of this and I have proof of that. You don't have proof. You have possible evidence. And there's a big difference between proof and evidence. Proof is like, I can prove this. Evidence is just a little piece of something that helps your argument. It doesn't prove anything, though. It's not a smoking gun. It's a cigarette butt left at a crime scene. It's evidence, but it doesn't prove anything. It just helps you build your case. So I think we all have to remember that. And that's why I never use the word proof. And I've gotten lots of comments from people saying, why don't you say proof? Or I notice you avoid saying the word proof, because proof means it's undisputable. We have proof. This is proven. And none of this is proven. We have evidence for certain things. I mean, footprints are evidence, but evidence can be wrong. Proof is a very different thing. So tree knocks, footprints, I think they're interesting evidence. I think we shouldn't ignore them, but in the grand scheme of things, I think they're a very small part of a much bigger picture. And I think that it's just way too easy to get wrapped up in footprints or tree knocks or howls and screams and all that other stuff. I think we really need to focus on eyewitness sightings. Like if you see something during the day, you get a good look at it, you get a lengthy look at it. It's not some fleeting glimpse from half a mile away. It's not a picture of a shadow in the woods, a tree stump, but the first and last sighting here that I'm talking about, again, those are very clearly either they're lying or they saw Bigfoot. I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room in between for anything else. You have to either say they're complete liars or they saw something very, very strange. So, but that's what we do here. We question everything. You have to question it because you can't just blindly accept what anybody says. And that's not saying that they're liars. It's just we have to look at it. We have to look at the evidence and see if we can explain it any other way before we say, okay, maybe this really was Bigfoot. Maybe. I'll never say anything was 100% Bigfoot. These stories today, even the impressive ones, who knows? Again, they could be lying. They could be embellishing their stories. Maybe it was a bear and they're just saying, oh, it was 7 feet tall. Maybe it really was only 4 feet tall. And they're saying, because who knows? I don't know. None of us knows, but we have to question it. And that's all we're doing here. But I was very impressed by those two stories, because if you just accept that these witnesses are not hoaxing, they're not lying, they're being sincere in what they saw, regardless of whether you believe in Bigfoot or not, they saw something strange. And that alone is worth looking into, because what are they seeing? So until next time, everybody, question everything. If you have a story you want to share, shoot me an email here, jason@autonuntold.com. I have a lot of people sharing stories with me now, and it's awesome. Again, not everybody wants me to share them on the air. I'm trying to get some people on the air to share their stories. But regardless, I love hearing your stories. And again, if you tell me don't share it, I'm not going to share it. I will not share your name. I will not tell your story. I just love hearing them. It helps me sort of build my evidence in my head and relate stories to one another and say, oh, this person is mentioning that too. Like there might be something to this. So yeah, shoot me an email if you guys have a story, jason@oddanduntold.com. And we have the merch store. So if you guys want hoodies or hats or anything like that, t-shirts, you can check that out. If you liked what you heard here, please give us a like and a subscribe, and you'll just be alerted to our videos every week when we post. We post every Friday at 7 p.m. And the likes and the comments and all that stuff helps the algorithm and helps us just get hits and build the channel. And the more we can build the channel, the better content we can bring you. So, and I say we because I couldn't do this alone. I have a lot of people who help me behind the scenes, Scott and John and Josh and my son and just so many people, everybody who listens to the show, my dad and Rebecca and Becky and everybody. I just appreciate all you guys who comment. Fly Spec Cafe, he or she, I'm not sure, but they're always commenting. Other people whose names I'm sure I'm forgetting right now, but I love all the comments. I love talking to you guys, interacting with you guys. Again, keep it respectful. We get the occasional rude comment or people who, think they know everything and just spout off. And I got to either delete the comment or just respond to them in the best way I know how, which I try to be polite and try to diffuse the situation, but try to be respectful because we're all here just for the same purpose. We all just want the truth, and we may all get there in a different way on a different road, but we're all going to the same destination. So until next time, everybody, question everything and rock and roll.